Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar by TJC. Please note that all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. To ask any questions, please use the Q&A facility on the toolbar of your screen. This webinar is being recorded. If you've dialed in as a guest, you can view more information about membership with the user group by following the link on screen or getting in touch with myself or a member of the team. At the end of this webinar, you will be directed to complete a very short survey. Your feedback is very important and it shouldn't take you any longer than 30 seconds to complete. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Steve from TJC to kick things off, and I hope you all enjoy. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome from us at TJC. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to join us. My name's Steve Pearce. I'm Head of Sales here in the UK, and I'll be playing more of a supporting role in the webinar today. Lawrence is going to be taking you through the majority of this. Your main speaker is Lawrence, who's been with TJC for the last 10 years. Lawrence was instrumental in setting TJC up in the UK and building the operation. So he's got a huge amount of experience with our clients in the UK and Northern Europe. And we've also got Manny Singh, who's one of our senior consultants, and he'll be overseeing the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. So a quick 30-second introduction to TJC for those of you on the call that don't know of us. For more than 20 years now, we've delivered consultancy and archiving data volume management solutions to more than 500 SAP clients worldwide. Now, many of our sites, just like the companies you guys work for, are multi-site, multinational, and the combination of 5 TJC offices and a network of global partners help us support those worldwide. So the 4 key areas of expertise for TJC, and we'll be going through sort of, or touching on all of these today. Archiving and information lifecycle management. So, what do you need to take from your old SAP environment to your new one? There's a decision to be made. Every year's worth of data adds cost to your HANA environment, and Lawrence is going to be sort of taking you through the thought process with that during the webinar today. And ILM as well, which actually relates quite nicely to the next section there, GDPR. So this is sensitive data and applying a lifecycle management strategy to your data. There's decommissioning and retirement of legacy systems. Now, we built everything on the SAP Cloud platform, so we follow all of the latest industry standard Cloud Foundry principles. And the final section there is compliancy. So we support your IT teams and help you to understand the sort of tax and audit requirements. So providing extract tools to automate sort of key compliance tasks and provide auditors with that information that you need quickly. So the agenda today, Lawrence is going to describe a couple of projects we've done with 2 of our major clients. The first, for those who are joining us from outside the UK, Dunelm. They're a major UK retailer of soft furnishings, a £1 billion company. And the second is one of the most recognisable brands in the industry, British Telecom, who are really sort of part of the UK core infrastructure. We'll be talking about the decisions you need to make about your legacy systems, and really it's all about opening a forum for conversation rather than being necessarily prescriptive and telling you what to do verbatim. There are obviously arguments for both sides of that conversation. We'll be looking at trackable and traceable data. Now, Lawrence will not only describe the difference between those 2 states, but actually give you a bit of advice on what changes to make to remain compliant. And the cost of ownership, well, that's a huge topic, and we'll be touching on that and shedding some light on the hidden costs of data retention. And then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end where my colleague Manny is going to step in and field any questions that you've posted throughout the webinar, either on the content of the webinar or sort of general archiving and SAP data and questions that you may have had. So we're going to kick off with a poll. So this is the first of 3 polls today, and let me just. Okay, sorry, I just. Jacob, could you just step in and reset that poll for me? For some reason, it's not setting properly. So we're going to run a couple of polls today. I really appreciate your input into this because we've got a great cross-section of industry on here, and it just helps us sort of gauge for the rest of the webinar you know, quite where we are with that. So first one's in progress now. There are a couple of questions there. Are you ready for your S4 HANA move? You may already be on S4 HANA, and roughly the timescales of that move. In terms of the timescales, in 2015, SAP announced that there'd be it will be end of life for ECC platforms in 2025. They extended that to 2027, so that at a no-cost option to extend the support for ECC. But that's only if you're on enhancement packs 6, 7, and 8. And then since then, they've also said, well, there will be a chargeable option to extend to 2030. Our understanding is that that's only going to be for enhancement packs 7 and 8. But you know, again, I mean, 2030 is a long way away, and it may well be that that SAP sort of changed their mind. So I'll just end the poll there. That's a great input. Thank you for everybody who shared that with us. And actually, that shows the vast majority of people on here are actually planning the move to S4, which is excellent. And it's a pretty even split about when you're looking to move there, which is very interesting for us, because we've found a lot of companies we've spoken to lately have actually been delaying this process and are actually at the stage where they don't really sort of know you know, when that change is going to be made. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lawrence, who's just going to take ownership of the webinar, and he's going to take you through the first point on that agenda. Thank you very much. Lawrence?
Is that shared, Steve?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, just go full screen.
I have. It's gone. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that. Technical hitch, it wouldn't go full screen. I have no idea why. Okay, pushing forward then, we've got a lot to cover. First area we're going to be looking at are 2 case studies, as Steve mentioned, and we are going to be talking about data volume management, their move to S4, etc. Just as an overview, TJC, what can we do for you, our value proposition? The idea of this is we can help you now sort out an archiving or a control strategy for volume management, which will allow you to get some immediate gains. The whole objective is to support you through that changeover period and end up on S4 in a safe place with your licenses migrated, your strategy migrated, and you're in a position to go forward. And so the examples that I'm going to be giving today, which are firstly Dunelm, that's what we've been working with the team at Dunelm. They're a well-known UK retailer, as Steve highlighted. I think it's 1.4 billion turnover. They're running ECC, they're archiving and have been archiving for a period, and they're preparing themselves for what is an intended move to go to S4. So looking at their landscape, and we can go back to 2014, they have BW, ECC, EWM. They started their own archiving, doing technical objects, as you would expect. Lots of people do that. And then they realized that to get the volume and the controls in place, they were going to need to do more. So they brought in TJC. We looked at all the business data, the business objects, looked at how we can improve the performance by reducing the volumes and help them control their database levels. And the main thing was automating the process, which is where the ACSC came in. That is a period of time from late 2014 through to early 2019. Then in 2020, there were some changes made, and the on-premises ECC6, which was residing on their own system, costing quite a bit of money, was move up into Amazon Web Services. So that gave them the advantage of storing that data in a lower cost environment and then preparing them for their inevitable move. And they're one of those companies who don't yet know that time frame. They haven't specified it, but they are looking that S4 is the probable place they will end up. They're looking now at reducing that data volume so that when they go to S4, they can be ready as much as they can be ready now to go into that world when the opportunity allows them to do that. So I want to look at some of the bullet points coming from their particular scenario. So improving the current ECC environment by using the SAP standard objects and then automating them to get that data volume down was their first step. Preparing for that migration has also allowed them, because there's less data in the database, to reduce their backup times, to reduce any restore times, and inevitably that will reduce their migration time. And at the moment, they are right sizing. They currently have about 4 years live on the system. They're now bringing that down to 3 years with an intention to go to 2 years. Now, it could be the business allow them to take that to even 1 year just prior to the migration they take. So more and more data will be coming off of the system as they get closer and closer. So that's why it's preparing for the S4 move. Everything they are doing is working towards what could happen. And that move they made onto AWS, that had an immediate saving of £8,000 a year, which in itself doesn't sound like a lot of money. But when you consider they're now going to take the 4 years down to 3 years, there's more data going to come out. And then to 2 years, more data is going to come out. And so we expect over the next 3, 4, 5 years, that saving to be in a regions of 40, 50,000, which is very worthwhile doing it. And also they got more capacity because they doubled the amount of capacity for resilience. So the 2.1 terabytes they've saved, they have actually got the 2.1 duplicated. So taking the bullet points, data archiving started some time ago. They knew that they needed more skill set on board to understand it. They didn't want to train all their own people up, so they brought in an external body, that was us. And then bringing in 23 years of experience, we were able to help them significantly improve what they were looking at, what they were trying to achieve. And then the big win for them was actually automating the process. Before, when they were running the technical objects, they were running them manually, and someone was doing that, setting up all the variables and dealing with that step by step. But in essence, you put in the archive session cockpit, which is a certified solution by SAP, and it does the job for you right the way through. And then that cloud storage brought them further cost savings, and there's energy consumption savings. And putting the files into the cloud also means when they go into the cloud for their S4, it will be a compatible environment. The second case study is BT. Now, BT is far more complex. It's a scenario which involves data archiving, applying GDPR to that data archiving, BW archiving, a move to HEC, and then the final move to S4. So taking the same format, looking at where we are, we started seriously on this project. We did start actually at the end of 2015, early 2016 for another reason. But this actual move to S4 began in 2017 when the original landscape as it was there was primarily BW and ECC6. And BT were on Oracle Financials as their primary solution. However, BT went out to tender and they selected S4 as their future path. That's not a decision we were involved in, but it's where they decided to go. But the key thing for the architects and the leads on the BW and the ECC side was they recognized that archiving automation was very complementary to their resourcing. At this time in BT, there was a significant manpower reorganization, which means they had to lose heads. And across the whole company, 13,000 people were made redundant. So that did impact on IT. It did cause some ripples in the system, and therefore the automation was a big win for them. And it also supports the ILM objects and therefore the GDPR aspects of what we needed to do. In 2020, this year, they have migrated out of the on-premises, the good old traditional standard place we've all been, into the HANA Enterprise Cloud, or the HEC as everybody calls it. And that migration has been very steady, something they've been very keen to control tightly. There's been no room for error, but they are now sitting this year with the Oracle Finance transferred to CFIN, or Central Finance, inside the HEC on HANA. They've got BW inside the HEC on HANA. They have ECC inside the HEC on HANA, and it's all sitting there ready for SAP and its partners to move it over to S4. However, there are things that need to be done there, and the reason they want to do those is quite clear. When you go to S4 and you end up in a HANA cloud in its real sense, rather than the halfway house being the HEC, you are going to move data and you are going to get very high costs on your HANA. So making sure you minimize impact is key. So this is where the automation has helped them. They've been pulling down the volume of data inside their live ECC. They are now addressing the BW with NLS and SAP IQ and taking out data from the live system into that nearline storage. And that will all gain them benefit when they move into S4HANA, which is programmed for 2022. That could easily be a few months either way, but the whole purpose is you will end up there with an environment of S4. ASC, which is the tool they use for the archiving, will be able to migrate over there. They will bring in tools like ELSA to start talking to the system, and all the archive files that exist originally on premises, now in HANA, will be accessible via the S4HANA. I just brought in the word ELSA, which is one of our tools. I wanted to quickly jump sideways on that just to take a quick view, because it's quite useful to see some of the screens that these tools that are being developed to manage the S4 world can be. From this, it's a very simple screen. It's a sales order, selection criteria. And what we see from the screen is that you have in item 3, SAP data, that's looking at the S4. The decommissioned data that was taken out from the HEC and didn't go over to the S4 HANA is in ELSA, which is the long-term repository. And any of the archives, whether it's the one in S4, which is being viewed, or whether it's something we've left somewhere else, you can basically see everything that is in the system and the landscape from a single screen, which is a very powerful tool and answers one of the questions many people have about archiving, is how do you get back to the data that you've got stored all over the place? So what I wanted to do was then just really summarize the BT. As I said, we're trying to move through this quite quickly. We'll give you the key bullet points that are going on. We were addressing serious data volume sizes. We are reducing migration times. If we had not been data archiving, they could not have managed the move to the HEC, the halfway house move, because the data volumes were too big. The data that's in there might surprise you to know that EE, which is part of the BT portfolio, has many personal clients. So there's a lot of GDPR sensitive data there. That all had to be brought under control of the system, which is what we do for them, one of the large projects that is just coming to an end now. And then the HANA costs. And I think this is key. If you look at the 4 and a bit terabytes we've taken out of the ECC and the 6 terabytes that's planned to come out of the BW, you are looking at 10 terabyte reduction of what needs to go across into the S4 environment. And so therefore you're now talking about quite a significant reduction in HANA in the final target solution. And that should be saving about 1.5 million over 5 years. That's not small money. So summarizing, the data archiving reduces the volumes. It gave them the opportunity to do the migration. It secures the data for future tax, audit and compliancy purposes and questions. The GDPR that we have done from what we call the bottom-up approach, i.e. they had in one of the big 4 to do the analysis of what is in the scope of GDPR, and then we've done the work inside the SAP system to bring that under control using archiving and ILM. The data reductions will give future HANA requirements a significant reduced cost base. And if you save £1 million at the start or £500,000 at the start, that is saved every year because you never used it in the first place. If you've used £500,000, then you're fighting to regain that. That's a totally different scenario than not actually needing it at the beginning. And then in the total cost of ownership, there's been less data to migrate. That's given them the much smaller backup restore windows, which means the risk is reduced and there is more time to do all the steps that you have to do. Now, I'm going into the next section, which is retain or decommission, and looking at those questions. But before we do that, Steve has a very quick poll.
Okay, thank you very much, Lawrence. Let me just share my screen once more. Here we are. Okay. Okay, so the next poll is really about decommissioning. Just like Lawrence said, that's the next section. So I'm going to just select the right poll. This is very slick, isn't it? Okay, good stuff. Okay, so I'll kick that poll off. So this is really sort of whether you've thought about the decommissioning of your SAP legacy systems. And I mean, that can be ERP, it can be CRM. It's really any of your older enterprise software that is no longer being enhanced, no longer being supported, or certainly won't be by the time you move to S4HANA. Now, it may well be that even if you're on S4HANA currently, it may be that you haven't sort of quite determined your strategy to decommission your old systems yet. But these are, I wouldn't say easy wins, because there's a lot to decommissioning systems, but really it's about you know, looking at what sort of old systems you got, what completed data you have, and what you can actually sort of get off your new platform and put into a decommissioned form. So let me just end that poll in there. That ran for about a minute or so. And actually, I'll just share the results with the group there. This is no great surprise, really, that the majority of people haven't considered it yet. You're in very good company. It's certainly our experience over the last sort of year or two with conversations we've had across all sorts of industries that it is sort of last to the party. It's kind of considered after the sort of the move, the uplift is done. So very interesting. Thank you very much for participating in that. And at this point, I'll hand back over to Lawrence to pick up the presentation for legacy systems and decommissioning.
Hopefully I'm back on and you can see me.
Perfect, Lawrence.
Okay, so retain or decommission, that's the question. So we're going to look at some of the subject matters around that. We are moving at quite a pace. We have a lot to discuss, but the objective is to try and start that thinking off and asking questions. Why is this not moving? My screen is not moving. Up there, it's gone. It's going. It's finally happened. Thank you. Okay, so first question, what is a legacy system? A legacy system, definition, it holds historic data. It should be a system that is closed, secured, typically read-only. There should not be any chance that it could be changed once it has stopped being used. But it costs pretty much the same as a normal system to be kept running if you do nothing to it. So why are legacy systems in scope? Why are they important? They have to respond to the inquiries over time. Those inquiries could be legal, tax, etc. They have to respond in different industries to different questions for different periods. The automotive and the airline industry will be different to pharmaceutical, and retail will be different to that, etc., etc. And different countries have different laws and different retention periods and different rules. And it's important you understand what all of those are in respect to your legacy system. So in the question of retain or decommission, do you retain it or do you decommission it? The real risk is the fines and penalties your company can incur. And if we refer to GDPR, it's stated as up to 4% of the company turnover, which is a lot of money if you are a normal, big-sized, multinational company. But more importantly than that is the brand damage, the reputational damage that can occur if the BBC decides to splash you all over the 9 o'clock news. So let's look at some of those questions and points in the next few slides. There are two main elements that come to mind. One, for retaining the system, how often is an inquiry made? Are those inquiries impact inquiries? Do they really, are they legal? Are they tax? Are they authoritative? And therefore, the cost of retaining the system, if you get enough of those often enough and frequent enough that it's a business decision to keep the system, you could typically be thinking of a large sum of money per annum. However, if you are only having an inquiry occasionally for relatively simple information that needs to be dealt with, then you can decommission. Now, I decommissioned a London borough a couple of years ago, and that London borough was paranoid, as all councils and public sector are, that it was going to be challenged on freedom of information, insurance claims, employee bits. It was going to be challenged regularly and thoroughly for the decommissioned information. So they built a whole team to be able to answer those questions. And in the following 2.5 years, they got no inquiries to go back to the old data. So understanding what the impact could be and how often you're going to go back is very, very difficult. And it's a very hard decision to make. But given the thought process, you can achieve it. I mentioned a couple of slides ago in the BT thing, ELSA. And one of the things that ELSA will guarantee you, as you saw from that screen, is the ability to get relatively quickly back to the old archive files, the old system information, and look at the new system as well. And the second thing it will do is it's done on a cloud platform because it's state of the art, it's reliable, it's where we all should be going. If we haven't gone there, we should be going there. So looking at tools like ELSA, which are designed to decommission, should give you confidence that it's a value for money option against the retaining the old system. So as with all my sections, I have my little takeaway summations. So only retain your system if your inquiries are considered to be that they're frequent enough and they justify you responding urgently within a known period. Now, if you go to the UK and the taxman, every inquiry he makes in the UK, you have 14 days as a minimum to reply. If you go to France, it's 7 days. And it is getting in some countries where there is, you know, a 1 day response time. That changes the need to have a system available or not. But I would say if you're a UK-based company, do not worry. You will always have time to respond from a decommissioned system. Decommissioning the system is an easy word to say, but you've got to make sure you can easily get back to the information you took out. You have to make sure that all of it is secure and that it is able to be monitored and that you have all the data that you needed. I'll come on to that in a later presentation or one of the next sections. You must remember to be smart. Everything you decommission from archive, etc., has to be trackable and traceable. And we'll discuss this in the next section so that it is audible. Because if you can track it, trace it, you know that you will be able to answer the legal questions that you are asked. And that is very key to this. So, track and trace. I'm going to give you two definitions because I think it's important. I'm not referring to COVID here, by the way. I'm referring to documents. Trackable is a path or a route indicated by recording. So in SAP terms, a document passing through a workflow so you know what stages it went through. Traceable is a mark left or made by an action. So someone who signs off a document or gives an approval is noted in the system as having done that. So combining trackable and traceable, you then have the record of what happened clearly. And you need that because to be auditable, you have to be able to return to the source or the origination of the item and follow the steps through cleanly and clearly to the current status. If you can do all those things, then you have a trackable, traceable, auditable system. So I'm now going to hand back to Steve for the next poll, and he's going to take over.
Okay, thank you very much, Lawrence. Okay, so the final poll for today is going to be, if I can just set this thing in motion while I'm talking. Okay, so now that Lawrence has given an explanation of the difference between trackable and traceable data, this is a quick poll just to see if you think you'll be able to demonstrate to your auditors that your ERP data is trackable and traceable from your current system to your new system. And that's a very sort of important differentiation to make, because what we're talking about is having a full audit trail for every action and interaction between your old system and your new system, and having that ability to not only take that data and run reports, but actually get that data in an efficient manner and in the time that your auditors would expect. So I'll leave it open for another couple of seconds just for the votes to come in. Thanks for contributing to this one, everybody. Okay, and we'll end it there. I'll just share those results with you on screen. And you can see there, again, not too surprising, to be honest. It's kind of borne out with the conversations we've had with clients and prospective clients of ours in recent months and years. And yeah, it's something that's not necessarily at the forefront of people's minds. There's so much focus on making decisions and moving the data on which platform. It's often sort of the ability to satisfy the auditors is sometimes secondary until, of course, those auditors book an appointment to come and see you. So thank you very much for contributing for that. And I'll hand back over to Lawrence to take you through the final section of the webinar today. Thanks.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Well,
Yeah,
I
hear you
hope
fine now,
I'm up
Lawrence.
and working and everybody can hear me.
That's right.
Okay. Track and traceable. Let's dive into this a little bit more because there was obviously quite a large number of people who want to know more by the result of that poll. So what could be done now to support track and trace, which will give you good stead into the future? Well, first of all, when you archive, typically per company code, so a logical process, you will be achieving a benefit for the future because it means your data is identifiable by the authorities, tax. You can give the answers, identified by you to answer the questions from the tax man, etc. When you archive, you secure data against time. If you have a system where you go back to reproduce an invoice, if a supplier or a vendor moves address, your EC system does not time, date, and stamp that against the invoice structure. It means that you can reproduce an invoice later and have the wrong address and detail information on it, so it's no longer valid against what was originally produced. Therefore, when you secure with archiving, you actually secure that data against the timeline. Automation gives you consistency, avoids human errors. Far be it from me to say that humans make a mistake, but they do. And when you are doing archiving, which if you've got, say, 20 companies in a country, and you've got 25 objects being processed, and you're doing that on a monthly basis, you're now starting 20 times 25 is 500 times 12. You're starting to get 6,000 plus jobs that you've got to do. And each archiving job has 4 stages of read, write, delete, etc. So you're starting to get into a number of that is impossible for a human being unless he's very organized and very methodical to achieve, which is why automation takes it away. And it also saves you having people dedicated to the most mundane, boring task you've ever heard of. Finally, security. When you archive files, they can only be read by the designated system. So the system that creates it is initially the only system that can read it. You can reallocate that designation to the S4. So later in life, the ECC ones can be read by the S4. But if someone was able to hack into your system and look at your storage, they would not be able to interpret what is in an archive file. To them, it's just a data blob. It can only be seen as nothing. It's not there. So therefore, Archiving secures data, secures logic against time, and it makes it a much faster process if it's automated. So you may have noticed that I have mentioned automation several times. It is one of the areas that in 23 years we found has been one of our successes and has been the most valuable thing to our customers. BT, straight away, the big win for them was the automation. They're prepared to say that, they do say it, and if you've been to any of the SUG presentations in the last 3 or 4 years, you will have seen Mark Holmes and BT making those statements. But the main thing is, there is a consistency in the naming policy. So every file that is created automatically gets named correctly against the policy you have set. You can control when the archiving takes place in the automation, because if you've got a business that's global, you might have peaks at different times of the day and the week, and therefore you want to take account that you're not doing housekeeping tasks during those times. You have an auditable record. Automation, because it's a tool, records everything it does. So you have the record in preparation for your auditors. We monitor what we call the archive ratio. You target normally in a commercial scenario, you target to be running 95%. That 95% of the archive ratio means that we're going to catch most things. There are other things you can do to gain that last 5%, but sometimes that's not as cost effective as just doing the majority. But the key to that is, if the archiving ratio falls away, somebody's changed something, something's happened. And often that is a new member of staff joining the organization, didn't know they had to close something off, and it's an early warning and gives you quick indication that you need to do something. And then the other thing that automation brings is, it's not just archiving, it runs the ILM delete objects, it runs the aging objects in S4, and overall they all work towards supporting your GDPR requirements. So, having said what automation does, what are the benefits that come from managing the data in the current system? First of all, using standard SAP objects and automating them means it's a SAP best practice, because you are using what they gave you to do what needs to be done. And you want to be in the place where, before you go into S4, you have tidied up, smartened up, and done everything properly as much as you can as that SAP prescribed, so that you're not moving more and more data that you don't need. Archiving will reduce storage and improve performance. Yes, there are many other elements to improving performance, but if your queries on your system don't have to interrogate much more data than it used to, it will get quicker. The system will run faster. It's logical. Less energy will be used. If you've got less storage, you're running less disks, you save energy. And when we talk about energy, I don't mean what's running the disk. I'm talking about those big air conditioning units, which are cooling everything down. And when you've got a big system, that can be a very expensive cost on the environmental side. It's also a big green flag you might find helps your company present itself to the outside world. Less data means your backup windows, your restore windows, your migration windows will all be better for you. There's nothing worse than going into something over the weekend where you've only got an hour's leeway. You're too close. You're running too tight to the wind, as we used to say. So having archiving take data out means you get better controls. Archiving will give you better control of your GDPR compliance. It doesn't do the compliance. That's not what I'm saying. but to achieve GDPR compliancy, using your archiving objects, your ILM objects, all are good steps towards that. And this is all preparation for what you've got now, getting it much smarter, so when you come to that S4 move, which many of you have said isn't yet planned, you'll be in a better place to do it. Now I'm going to take a slight sideways step here. It's something I feel I need to do. But when you bought your last system, were you told how long it would go before it would go end of life? Were you told what to do when it goes end of life? If you're looking at new technologies now for any reason, have your technical people decided what it's going to look like at end of life and in a few years? I doubt it, but these are things we should be considering now. Think about it. The real question is, what's it going to be in 40 years from now? Will it still be there? If any of you can remember back to 1980, SAP was R2 on a mainframe with real-time processing. Now, unfortunately, I actually remember ICL, Digital Equipment Company, Cabletron and 3Com. All of these companies were massive, massive tech giants. They're gone. They're no longer there. In 40 years, the work lifespan of a working man. So we're in 2020. What's it going to look like in 2060? I know we don't know, but you need to be asking that question because that's the real world question. So what really matters? What really matters is what and how we extract the information. Take everything. Always take everything. Build a tax archive so that the data, the most likely person to give you hassle is the taxman, the authorities. So make sure that you build a tax archive. Yes, today you worry about interfaces, you spend a lot of money on interfaces, etc. But once you decommission, the interface is dead, it's not needed. So don't worry, it's gone. But the data is important. And if there are empty tables in the system, extract them, take them. Because if you can prove a table was empty, you can prove back to the source. As I said, right at the beginning of track and trace section, you've got to be able to go back to the beginning. And keeping the information auditable so you can prove back to the source, i.e. it's not been tampered, it's not been changed, it's clean. Those are the things that really matter. And there's a few other things. In a slightly more practical term, yeah, a very simple bit of logic. When you extracted it, is it what you expected? Did you apply some CRC, cyclic redundancy checks, on the data to make sure what you got out is what you've got to move forward with? Have you applied continuous auditability and privacy on the data that you've got? I.e., was it being GDPR looked at in the system, and is it still being looked at? Because don't forget, the data doesn't die. The system might, but the data doesn't. And you will need an audit report now when you decommission the system in 5 years, 10 years, 20, 40 years, whatever it is. And most importantly, when you buy your decommissioning system, etc., as an example, what is the rules that you're going to use for decommissioning? How does that go end of life? Because that decommissioning system might only last 20, 30 years. So if you take ELSA, it gives you a full audit report of everything that's gone on. But make sure whatever you're looking at gives you that complete picture. So hopefully this section has challenged the questions you need to ask. So let's sum them up. Having archiving and ILM in place now is a good place to be for that smart move to S4. Always think about the lifetime, the life of the system. How long is it going to be there? Do you have a practical, usable information retention policy? Because you've got to know in today's world, when you reach the point at which data needs to be deleted, that you delete it. And when you reach the point that data has to be retained, that you retain it. Maintain throughout everything your records of traceability, trackability, auditability, always. So for those of you who are thinking we're taking a long time, we're on the last section, coming down to the final bit. I'll keep this short, but the total cost of ownership and how can archiving give you savings on that now? There's many components and variables in the cost of ownership. Some will apply to you, but not all of them. TJC, I'm just going to focus on the ones that we deal with in the next slide. Whoops. Sorry, that jumped that slide. The areas where you can make savings and direct savings are data volume management, archive volume reduction, and energy savings, bringing the automation in, smooth that all the way through. And archiving and its associated functions impact on savings when you decommission, when you do your track and trace, when you do your ILM and GDPR, and very importantly, on your tax, SAFT, if you're European, you may be knowledge of that, and DART. So all of those areas, using archiving to a greater or lesser extent, will give you value savings all the way through. So my final summary, I said this was a short section. We have a client, a European client, who they have calculated, not us, that they save £2.5 million by removing 55K of data from live into archive. That same client estimated that 149% of their current energy consumption, so if they were using 10 dingbats now of energy, they have saved 14.9 dingbats of saving when they remove that. So the energy saving was not insignificant when the volume is particularly large. The archive techniques are standard for long-term retention. They retain clear records, so it shows who did what, when, how, why, and that means you are in a secure environment to move it forward and be audited. And archiving and ILM underpin the information retention policy that will need to exist in your company as you go into the future if you don't already have one. Now I'm going to hand back to Steve to wrap up, etc. Steve? I've stopped the share.
Thank you, Lawrence. Bear with me, please. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, just bear with me for 1 second. I do apologise. Just find the right thing to share. I do apologise. Okay. Good stuff. Sorry about that. So, final thoughts. Firstly, I'd like to thank the enormous majority of you that have stayed with us for the whole of this session. Obviously, we can see how many attendees are with us, and it's great that you've hung on in there. So thank you very much for that. There's a lot of information that Lawrence has given you today. Really, it comes down to these four things. S/4HANA, the biggest savings by far are to be made on sort of savings you can make with HANA memory costs. So the value of a data archiving, data volume management policy are huge. Legacy systems always last to the party, but well worth considering the strategy while you're going through the process of uplifting to S/4HANA, or if you're moving away from S/4HANA altogether, of course, because you'll still have those SAP systems that you need to make a decision on. GDPR, your FDs will thank you for making sure you've got a robust strategy on GDPR and ILM in place. And total cost of ownership. This is such a huge subject. We could easily do a webinar just on this, but we've touched on a few of those. We've given you some food for thought, and we hope we've sort of brought to your attention those that will sort of realise the biggest savings, and actually those total costs of ownership, you know, are sort of addressed within an archiving data volume management strategy itself. So at this point, I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute or two. I'm going to let my colleague Manny just come in. I think we've had a couple of questions during the course of this webinar. So Manny, would you like to chip in there and cover those?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, the one question that we did get today and seem to get often is whether or not we can apply archiving to customized tables that aren't substandard. We have and can perform archiving and create archiving objects for customized tables. And for one of our big telecommunications companies, we have provided them a solution to do so. So a very pertinent question, and again, it's one question that we come across a lot. That was the only main point that I suppose we needed to make. And
okay, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much, Manny. Thank you for that. Actually, that's worked out beautifully, because I think we're right at the top of the hour now, so we've kind of hit that target, if nothing else. So really, on behalf of myself, Lawrence and Manny, I'd like to thank you all for spending some time with us today. I hope you found it informative. It's certainly what we set out for it to be. My contact details are on the screen. For those of you who opted in and were happy to share your contact details, we'll send you a copy of the webinar or a link to a copy of it. And if you didn't share your contact details, but you'd like a copy of the slides, or when it's sort of up online, a link to the webinar, then by all means drop me a line on the email you see on the screen there. Just watch the spelling of my surname. It's a little unusual. Okay, so with that, thank you very much indeed, and hopefully we'll see you at our next event. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. I hope everybody enjoyed that. And just a reminder, you will be taken to complete a very short survey. We'd really appreciate if you could take 30 seconds or so to fill that out. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day. Thank you.